On a crowded morning, a poor college student sat in a packed subway car. Just moments earlier, she had finished an exhausting early shift at a diner, her legs aching and the soles of her worn shoes barely holding together. But when she saw an elderly man who looked visibly exhausted and unsteady, immediately, the young woman quietly stood up and gave him her seat, enduring the pain for the rest of the ride. What she didn't know was that the old man was actually a billionaire, and that this single moment would change her future in ways she never could have imagined. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype, because tomorrow, I've got something extra special for you. The subway car lurched forward, packed tight with the Monday morning crowd in downtown Austin. Sarah had managed to claim a seat near the center doors after boarding 3 stops earlier, a small victory after being awake since 4:30 that morning, working the breakfast shift at a diner before rushing toward her 8 o'clock class. She sat with her backpack on her lap, her feet throbbing inside worn sneakers she had glued back together just a week earlier. The sole was peeling again, she could feel it even sitting down. Her diner uniform was crammed into her backpack, replaced by jeans and a thin thrift store sweater with a small tear under the arm. When the doors opened at Capitol Station, another wave of passengers pushed inside. Sarah looked up from her exhausted days and saw him. An elderly man stepped onto the train slowly, hesitating for just a second too long as if unsure where to stand. He wore an expensive charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, with polished leather shoes and a silk tie that looked out of place in the crowded car. But his appearance couldn't hide what truly caught her attention, his face, pale, drawn, deeply tired in a way that suggested more than just a bad night's sleep. He gripped the rail near the doors with one hand, his fingers stiff, his body swaying slightly every time the train jerked forward. For a moment, he seemed disoriented, his eyes unfocused, as if the noise and motion were overwhelming him. He blinked slowly, jaw tightening, trying to steady himself without drawing attention. Sarah glanced around. People stared at their phones, scrolled through headlines, looked past him as if he wasn't there at all. No one moved, no one offered help. She looked at her seat, the narrow bench she'd been grateful to claim. She had already been on her feet for 3 hours at the diner. Her back ached, her feet burned. She still had classes until 3, then another shift that would keep her standing until late at night. And yet, watching the old man struggle quietly to stay upright, trying not to look lost, trying not to fall, she felt something tighten in her chest. She could pretend she didn't see him. No one would judge her, no one would even notice. But she thought about her mother, about the way Linda Mitchell had always stopped to help, even when she had nothing left to give. Even when her own body was failing her, cleaning houses until her heart literally gave out on someone else's kitchen floor. Sarah felt the weight of that choice pressing down on her. Keep the seat and preserve what little energy she had left. Or stand and add more hours of pain to a day already full of it. Her feet were screaming. Her lower back had that deep ache that meant she would be hurting for days. She had a chemistry exam on Wednesday that she hadn't studied enough for because she had picked up an extra shift to send Marcus $20 for his basketball shoes. Every part of her body was telling her to stay seated, but her mother's voice was louder. Baby, everyone carries something heavy. The question is what kind of person you want to be. Sarah stood up. Excuse me, sir, she said quietly. Would you like to sit down? The man's eyes focused on her, blue-gray eyes that had seen a lot of years. He studied her face for a moment, and Sarah felt suddenly self-conscious of the dark circles under her own eyes, the way her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail. That's very kind of you, he said. His voice was measured, cultured, but I couldn't take your spot. I'm getting off in 2 stops anyway. Sarah lied. She had 6 more stops to go. Please, you look like you need it more than I do. It wasn't entirely true, they probably needed it equally. But something in his face, the deep exhaustion there, the loneliness she recognized from her own mirror, made her insist. The man hesitated, then nodded slowly and moved to the seat, settling himself with the careful movements of someone whose body didn't quite obey anymore. Thank you, he said, looking up at her. Truly. That's very kind. Sarah smiled and moved back toward the center pole, grabbing the overhead rail as the train picked up speed. Her feet immediately began to throb worse. She shifted her weight, trying to find a position that did not hurt. 6 more stops. She could make it 6 more stops. She did not know that the man she had just helped was worth more than $3 billion. She did not know his name was William Harrison, that he owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Austin and had built his fortune from nothing over 50 years. She did not know that he had not taken public transportation in nearly 20 years. She just knew he looked tired and alone. And she knew what her mother would have done. That was enough. The train rumbled through the darkness, carrying strangers who would never know each other's names, who would never understand the weight each person carried, who made small choices every day that rippled out in ways they could not imagine. Sarah closed her eyes and breathed through the pain in her feet. It was just 6 more stops. She could do this. William Harrison sat on the hard plastic bench and felt something crack open inside his chest. Shame. Real, genuine shame. Not the performative kind he had learned to display in board meetings when discussing layoffs. Not the calculated regret he expressed when a development displaced low-income families. Real shame, the kind that made his throat tight and his eyes burn. This morning had started badly. His driver had called in sick at the last minute, his voice hoarse with what sounded like genuine illness. William's backup car service was delayed by an accident on Mopac that had traffic backed up for miles. And he had a board meeting at 9 o'clock that could not be rescheduled, a meeting where the jobs of 500 employees hung in the balance depending on decisions that would be made in the next 3 hours. So he had done what he had not done since 1997. He had walked to the nearest metro station, dug through his wallet for the transit card he kept for reasons he could not articulate, found it somehow still valid, and boarded the train. He had forgotten how it felt to be invisible. In his world, people moved when he entered a room. Assistants anticipated his needs before he voiced them. Doors opened before he reached them. Security teams ensured he never had to wait, never had to stand, never had to navigate any discomfort or inconvenience. But here, underground, crushed between strangers who smelled like coffee and morning stress, he was just another old man in a suit. No one knew that his signature on a single document could create or destroy entire companies. No one knew that he employed 14,000 people across 4 states. No one knew that the Harrison Foundation, established by his father and maintained by his accountants, donated millions to causes he rarely had time to review. And no one had offered him a seat. Until her, William studied the young woman now standing by the center pole. She was small, maybe 5'3", with dark skin and expressive brown eyes that held a weariness beyond her years. Her clothes were clean but worn, the kind of worn that came from being washed too many times, not from deliberate fashion. Her backpack had patches sewn over tears. Her sneakers were literally falling apart, the sole separating from the upper, and she was in pain. He could see it in the way she shifted her weight every few seconds, the careful way she held herself, the tightness around her eyes. She had given up her seat when she needed it as desperately as he did. More, probably. The train swayed and she grabbed the overhead rail tighter, her knuckles going pale. William watched her pull out a textbook from her backpack, balancing it on her forearm. Chemistry. Advanced organic chemistry. She highlighted passages with a yellow marker that was nearly dry, making faint marks on the page. His father had wanted to study chemistry. The thought came unbidden, a memory William had not accessed in decades. Robert Harrison, working at the tire factory in Midland, coming home every night with hands stained black from rubber and chemicals. But on weekends he would check out books from the library. Chemistry, physics, biology. He would read them at the kitchen table while William's mother cooked, and sometimes he would explain concepts to young William. See, son, everything in the universe follows rules. You just have to learn what they are. Robert Harrison had wanted to be a teacher, a science teacher. But teachers did not make enough money to support a wife and 3 sons in West Texas in the 1940s. So he had gone to work at the factory instead, spending 42 years breathing in chemical fumes and rubber dust, until his lungs gave out when he was 64. William had been 31 then. Already wealthy, already successful. He had offered to help his parents many times over the years. Offered to buy them a better house, to pay for his father to retire early, to make their lives easier. His father had always refused. We're fine, son. You save your money. Build your future. That's what we want for you. So William had saved his money, had built his future, had accumulated wealth beyond anything his parents could have imagined. And they had died without ever benefiting from any of it. His father at 64, lungs destroyed by decades of chemical exposure. His mother 2 years later, as if she had just been waiting for permission to follow. At their funerals, William had not cried. He had been too busy, too important, too convinced that emotion was weakness and grief was something you scheduled between meetings. Now, sitting on a subway seat that a struggling college student had given him out of pure kindness, William felt tears prick his eyes for the first time in 42 years. When was the last time someone had given him something without wanting anything in return? When was the last time he had given something without calculating the return on investment? The young woman shifted her weight again, grimacing slightly. A large man in construction gear pushed past her, nearly knocking the textbook from her hands. She caught it, smiled apologetically as if it had been her fault, and pressed herself smaller against the pole to make room. William felt something twist in his chest. He had not made himself smaller for anyone in 50 years. The train continued through the tunnel, and William stared at his reflection in the dark window. An old man. 73 years old, though he told people he was 70. His wife Margaret had died 8 years ago. Cancer that the best doctors and the most expensive treatments could not stop. She had spent her last months in a hospital suite that cost more per day than most people earned in a week. And she had died anyway, holding his hand and whispering, "I wish we'd spent more time living and less time accumulating." He had not understood what she meant then. He understood now. His son Robert Jr., named after his grandfather but nothing like him, lived in San Diego and called twice a year. Christmas and William's birthday. Dutiful 10-minute phone calls where they discussed weather and generic pleasantries and never anything real. His daughter Elizabeth had not spoken to him in 11 years. Not since he had told her that leaving the family business to become a high school chemistry teacher was throwing away her potential. Not since he had said, "Your grandfather worked in a factory so you wouldn't have to struggle. And you want to choose struggle anyway." Not since she had looked at him with her mother's eyes and said, "Grandpa worked in a factory because he had to. I'm choosing to teach because I want to. There's a difference, but you'll never understand it." She had been right, he had not understood. But watching this young woman stand in pain so he could sit, watching her study chemistry with a nearly dry highlighter, watching her make herself smaller so others could have space, he was beginning to understand. His father had established a small scholarship fund before he died. Nothing major, just $5,000 a year for one student from Midland to attend college. The Robert Harrison Memorial Scholarship. William had taken it over after his father's death, had increased the endowment, had let his accountants manage it. For 42 years, that scholarship had put students through school. 42 students who might not have had the chance otherwise. And William had signed the checks without ever meeting any of them, without ever knowing their names, without ever understanding what his father had been trying to build. A legacy that mattered more than money. The train began to slow, the young woman straightened, preparing to exit. William suddenly, desperately wanted to know her name. Wanted to thank her properly. Wanted to tell her that she had reminded him of something essential that he had lost. But the doors opened and she stepped off, disappearing into the crowd on the platform before he could speak. William watched her go, and felt the weight of 73 years pressing down on him. He had built an empire. He had accumulated more wealth than 3 generations of his descendants could spend. He had towers and properties and investments scattered across 4 states, and this morning, the only genuine human kindness he had experienced in recent memory had come from a young woman who probably had less than $50 in her bank account. The train doors closed and moved forward. William sat alone with his shame. He was 73 years old. He probably had 10 good years left if he was lucky, maybe 15 if he was very lucky. Maybe it was time to figure out what his father had known all along. That success was not measured in buildings or bank accounts. That legacy was built in the lives you touched, not the properties you owned. That sometimes the most important thing you could do was make yourself smaller so someone else could have space. William made a decision. He did not know exactly what that decision was yet, only that something fundamental had to change. Not just his charitable giving or his business practices, but something deeper. The way he saw people. The way he measured worth. The way he spent whatever time he had left. At the next stop, William got off and took a car service the rest of the way to his meeting. But his mind was not on quarterly reports or development projects. His mind was on a young woman with a worn backpack and a chemistry textbook who had chosen kindness when it cost her something real. He needed to find her again. Not to reward her, not to make himself feel better, but to learn from her, to remember what his father had tried to teach him before the money and the power had made him forget everything that mattered. Sarah got off the train at the university station and walked the 6 blocks to campus. Each step sent pain shooting through her feet and up her calves. She focused on breathing through it, on keeping her pace steady. She could not afford to be late to Professor Williams' class. He had a policy: 3 tardies and your grade dropped a full letter. Sarah could not afford to lose even half a letter. Her first class was Introduction to Business Ethics, which struck her as darkly ironic given that she was barely surviving while the professor drove a BMW and complained about the inconvenience of faculty parking being a whole 2 minutes from his office. She slid into a seat near the back and pulled out her notebook. Her hand ached from the burn she had gotten yesterday at the diner, when a customer had complained that his eggs were taking too long and she had rushed, grabbing a pan handle she had not realized was still hot. The bandage was already dirty from this morning's shift, she would need to change it later. Professor Williams was discussing stakeholder theory, the idea that companies had obligations beyond just making money for shareholders. Sarah took notes automatically, her hand moving across the page while her mind drifted. The old man on the train. She could not stop thinking about him. About the weight of that choice to give up her seat. It was not a big thing. People gave up seats every day. But right now her feet hurt so badly she wanted to cry, and she had 8 more hours before she could go home and collapse. 8 more hours of standing and walking and smiling through the pain. Why had she done it? The easy answer was that her mother had taught her to be kind. But there was more to it than that. When Sarah had looked at that old man, she had seen something she recognized, not just exhaustion but a deeper weariness. The kind her mother had in the months before she died. The look of someone who had lived a long time and was not entirely sure anyone would notice if they disappeared. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it under the desk, a text from Marcus, her 17-year-old brother in Houston. Aunt Helen says the water bill was high again. She's stressed about money. I feel bad. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She typed back quickly. Don't worry about it. I'll send some extra this week. She stared at the message after she sent it. Send extra, with what money? She had already done the math that morning while waiting for the bus to the subway station. After this month's bills, she had $42 left. $42 to stretch across 12 more days until her next paycheck. She had planned to use 30 of it to buy the chemistry textbook she needed for next semester. Used from the bookstore. She had checked already, but if she sent Marcus $50 to help with the water bill, she would have to figure something else out. Maybe she could share a textbook. Maybe she could find a PDF online. Maybe she could work extra hours and buy it later, even if it meant falling behind. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Take care of your brother. He's all you've got left. Sarah slipped her phone back into her pocket and tried to focus as Professor Williams lectured about corporate social responsibility. He spoke enthusiastically about major corporations and their charitable foundations, about community outreach programs and brand image, as if generosity were just another business strategy. These companies understand that giving back isn't just morally right, he said. It's good business. Sarah wanted to raise her hand and ask what happened when giving cost you something real. When there was no return. When you gave because someone needed help, not because it looked good on a report. But she stayed quiet, took notes and waited for class to end. Afterward, she went to the library and claimed her usual spot on the 3rd floor, tucked into a corner away from the windows and the groups of students who came to talk instead of study. She had 4 hours before her evening shift at the diner, 4 hours to prepare for her chemistry exam, read for anatomy, and write a response paper for ethics. She opened her organic chemistry textbook, but her focus kept slipping back to the numbers she could never quite make work. Rent was $650, her share of a 2-bedroom apartment she shared with 2 other students, sleeping on a mattress in the living room. Utilities ran about $75. Phone bill, $40. Textbooks this semester had cost $320, charged to a credit card with 19% interest because she had no other option. Groceries hovered around $150 a month, rice, beans, eggs and whatever day-old bread the diner let her take home. Transportation was $48 for a monthly Metro pass. That totaled $983, and that didn't include the loan for her mother's funeral, $100 a month at 22% interest. She had been 19, with no credit, and the funeral home had been more flexible than the hospital ever was with her mother's medical bills. $1,083 every month just to survive. She earned about $1,800 a month working 30 hours a week at the diner. After expenses, that left roughly $700 for everything else: clothes, school supplies, medical costs, and helping Marcus because their aunt was already stretched thin raising her own kids. $700 sounded like enough. It never was. There was always something. A textbook that cost more than planned. A missed shift for an exam. Antibiotics when she got sick. Last semester her laptop died, and she was still paying off the refurbished replacement. Sarah closed her book and leaned back in her chair, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. She didn't know how long she could keep balancing everything. She only knew she had to keep trying, because stopping wasn't an option. And now Marcus needed help with the water bill. Sarah put her head down on her textbook and closed her eyes. She was so tired, so constantly, endlessly tired. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. "Never mind sis, coach says he can get me some hours helping at the community center after practice. I'll be okay." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Marcus should not have to work. Marcus should focus on school and basketball. He was good, really good, good enough for a scholarship if he could just keep his grades up and keep improving his game. But he could not do that if he was working after practice every day. She typed back, "No, focus on basketball. I've got this, I'll send you money on Friday." She would figure it out. She always figured it out, even if it meant skipping meals, even if it meant walking instead of taking the bus sometimes to save the fare, even if it meant studying until 3 in the morning because she had to work extra shifts to make up the money. She would figure it out because Marcus was all she had left. Because their mother had died on someone else's kitchen floor, and the last thing she had said to Sarah was, "Take care of your brother. Promise me." Sarah had promised. She studied until her alarm went off at 5:30, signaling that it was time to head to the diner for the evening shift. She packed up her books, checked her appearance in the bathroom mirror, tried to make herself look less exhausted, and headed back out into the afternoon heat. The diner was already busy when she arrived, full of early dinner customers and students grabbing food between classes. Sarah tied on her apron, forced a smile onto her face, and started taking orders. "Can I get a refill?" A customer called, holding up an empty coffee cup. "Right away, sir. This burger is supposed to be medium rare. This is medium." "I'm so sorry, let me get you a new one right away." "Do you have any specials today?" "Yes, ma'am. We have meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans for $8.95. Sarah moved through her shift on autopilot, her mind elsewhere. She thought about the old man on the train, wondered if he had made it to wherever he was going, wondered if he ever thought about the people who served him his coffee, cleaned his offices, made his life run smoothly while struggling to keep their own lives from falling apart. Probably not. In Sarah's experience, people with money did not think much about people without it. They were not cruel, exactly, just oblivious. They lived in a different world, one where subway seats were not precious commodities and worn-out sneakers were a fashion choice rather than a necessity. Around 8 o'clock, a family came in. Parents and 2 kids, maybe 8 and 10 years old. They ordered burgers and fries and milkshakes. Sarah brought their food, and watched the kids argue over who got to drink from which colored straw. The mother smiled apologetically. "They're always like this." "Sorry, it's fine," Sarah said. "I have a younger brother, I remember." After they left, Sarah found a $5 tip on the table. Underneath it was a note written on a napkin. "Thank you for your patience, you're doing great." Sarah stood there holding the napkin, feeling tears well up in her eyes. It was such a small thing. $5 and a kind word. But it mattered. God, it mattered. She tucked the napkin into her apron pocket and got back to work. By the time her shift ended at 11, Sarah could barely walk. Her feet felt like they were on fire. Her back ached. Her burned hand throbbed, despite the pain reliever she had taken at the beginning of her shift.
She took the last train home, standing for the entire ride because all the seats were taken and she was too tired to even hope someone would offer her one. At her apartment, her roommates were already asleep. Sarah lay down on her mattress on the living room floor without bothering to change out of her uniform. She pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. Balance $42.31. She navigated to the transfer screen and sent $50 to Marcus. The transaction would overdraw her account by $7.69, triggering a $35 overdraft fee. Sarah stared at the screen. $77 total, gone for a $50 transfer. But Marcus would have the money. Marcus could help his aunt with the water bill. Marcus could focus on basketball instead of worrying about being a burden. Sarah set her phone down and turned her face into her thin pillow. She cried silently, the way she had learned to cry so she would not wake her roommates. She cried for her mother, who had worked herself to death for nothing. She cried for Marcus, who was trying so hard to be brave. She cried for herself and the impossible weight of trying to survive while everyone around her seemed to float effortlessly forward. And she cried because today she had given up her seat to a stranger, had chosen kindness when she could barely afford to be kind to herself, and she could not even explain why it had felt important. She fell asleep in her uniform, too exhausted to move. She dreamed of her mother, cleaning floors that never got clean, working jobs that never ended, carrying weights that never got lighter. In the dream, her mother looked at her and said, "You're doing it wrong, baby. You're not supposed to carry it all alone." But when Sarah woke at 4:30 the next morning, her mother was gone and she was alone, and the weight was still there, heavier than ever. She got up and put on her uniform and went to work. Because that was what you did. You carried the weight because there was no one else to carry it.
You kept going because stopping was not an option, and sometimes when you saw someone else who looked tired, you gave them your seat even though you needed it just as much. Not because it made sense, but because your mother had taught you that kindness mattered even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. William Harrison sat in his office that evening and did something he had not done in 8 years. He pulled out the box of materials from his father's scholarship fund. The Robert Harrison Memorial Scholarship had been established in 1982, the year after his father died. Robert had left instructions in his will $5,000 to be used for a scholarship to help one student from Midland attend college. That was it, his entire life savings minus what he had left to William's mother for her remaining years. William had taken over the fund, had increased the initial endowment to $250,000, had let it grow over the years through careful investment. For 42 years, one student per year had received the scholarship. 42 students who had gone on to become teachers, nurses, engineers, social workers. People who contributed to their communities in ways that mattered. And William had never met a single one of them. He had signed the checks, had approved the accountant's recommendations, had received annual reports about the fund's performance. But he had never actually engaged with the program his father had created. Now he pulled out the files. 42 folders, one for each recipient. He opened the first one. Jennifer Martinez, class of 1983, first-generation college student from Midland, studied education at Texas Tech, became a middle school science teacher. The file included a thank you letter written in careful handwriting on lined paper. Dear Mr. Harrison, I don't have words to express what this scholarship means to my family. I'm the first person in my family to attend college. My father works at the same tire factory where your father worked. He comes home every night exhausted, but he still helps me with my homework. He says your father was a good man who treated everyone with respect. I'm going to be a teacher because of men like your father. Because of people who believe that education can change lives. Thank you for continuing his legacy. Sincerely, Jennifer Martinez. William sat with the letter for a long time. Then he opened another folder. David Chen, class of 1991, studied nursing at UT Austin, worked at a community health clinic in El Paso for 23 years. His letter was briefer but no less heartfelt. This scholarship saved my life. Thank you. William went through folder after folder. Teachers, social workers, nurses, a few engineers and accountants, but mostly people who had chosen service over profit. People who had taken the opportunity his father's money provided and used it to help others. People who had understood what his father had been trying to teach. William reached for his phone and called his head of operations, David Torres. David, I need you to find someone for me. Of course. Who? A young woman, early 20s, African American, studies chemistry at Austin Community College. She works at a diner, probably on 6th Street based on where she got on the subway. I don't have a name. There was a pause. William, that's not a lot to go on. I know, but I need to find her. It's important. May I ask why? William thought about how to answer. Because she reminded me what my father was trying to build. And I need to talk to her before I decide what to do next. I'll see what I can find. William hung up and returned to the folders. He read letters from grateful students, followed their career trajectories through the updates they had sent over the years. Many of them were still in touch with the foundation, still sending annual updates, still expressing gratitude for an opportunity that had changed their lives. His father had died at 64 with barely $5,000 in savings. But he had left a legacy that had touched 42 lives directly and countless more indirectly through the work those 42 people had gone on to do. William was worth over $3 billion. What legacy was he leaving? Buildings with his name on them. Development projects that displaced low-income communities. A charitable foundation that wrote checks to causes he never personally reviewed. His phone rang. It was Margaret, his CFO and the only member of his executive team willing to call him after business hours. William, we need to talk about the Riverside project. The city council is pushing back hard on our development proposal. What's their concern? They want us to include affordable housing units. 20% of the total at below market rates. It's going to significantly impact our profit margins. A year ago William would have immediately started strategizing how to fight this. How to find loopholes in the zoning laws. How to lobby the right council members. How to protect his returns at any cost. But tonight, sitting with his father's legacy spread out before him, he said something different. Give them 30%. Silence on the other end. Then I'm sorry, what? 30% affordable housing. High-quality units, not the cheapest builds we can get away with. Integrated throughout the building, not segregated to the less desirable sections. Market the project as mixed income from the beginning. William, are you feeling all right? I'm feeling like I've spent 42 years missing the point. He paused. My father worked at a tire factory for 42 years and died with $5,000 in savings. He used that money to send one student to college. One. And I've read letters tonight from 42 people whose lives were changed because of that $5,000. That's wonderful, but I'm worth $3 billion, Margaret. And I'm not sure I've changed 42 lives. I've built buildings. I've made money. But what have I actually done that matters? You employ 14,000 people. And how many of them can afford to live in the buildings I develop? William stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city. Include the affordable housing. 30%. And I want to meet with the city council personally to discuss how we can make this project benefit the community, not just our shareholders. Another long silence. All right. I'll set up the meeting. After he hung up, William sat at his desk and did something he hadn't done in decades. He took out a sheet of paper and a pen. Everything was digital now, but this needed to be written by hand. Dear Elizabeth, I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away unopened. 11 years is a long time, and I have no right to ask for your attention after the things I said. But I need to tell you something. I was wrong about everything. Your grandfather wanted to be a chemistry teacher. He loved science the way you do. On weekends he borrowed books from the library and read them at the kitchen table while your grandmother cooked. He explained ideas to me that I didn't yet understand, but he was patient. He believed education was the greatest gift a person could give. But teachers didn't earn enough to support a family in 1945. So he went to work at the tire factory instead. He spent 42 years breathing chemical fumes, and it killed him. His lungs gave out when he was 64. When he died he left $5,000 for a scholarship, his entire savings, to send one student from Midland to college. One chance he never had himself. I took over that scholarship and grew it. For 42 years it has sent one student a year to college. Tonight I read letters from all 42 recipients, teachers, nurses, social workers, people who used that opportunity to help others. And I finally understood something. Dad knew what success really meant. It wasn't accumulation, it was what you gave away. It was creating opportunities so others could become what they were meant to be. When I told you that becoming a chemistry teacher was wasting your potential, I was wrong. You were honoring Grandpa's dream. You were becoming what he would have been if life had allowed it. And I should have celebrated that instead of tearing it down. I built my fortune on the foundation of Dad's sacrifice, then had the arrogance to tell you his dream was beneath you. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. For not understanding. For missing your wedding. For missing the births of your children. For 11 years of pride. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know that I was wrong, and that I am proud of you, even if I never said it. If you're willing, I would like to meet your husband and your children. I'm 73 now, and I'm tired of choosing pride over family. If you're not ready, I understand. Your father, William. He sealed the letter and placed it on his desk where he would see it in the morning. He would mail it before he could change his mind. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. That night, William dreamed of his father for the first time in decades. Robert Harrison stood in his work clothes, explaining the periodic table to a young boy. Every element has its properties, his father said. You can't change what something is made of. But you can change how you use it. Same element, different outcome. That's real chemistry. William woke at dawn with tears on his face. It was time to change the chemistry of his life, to take the same elements, the money and power and influence, and create a different outcome. Not buildings with his name on them, but opportunities. Not accumulation, but legacy. He mailed the letter. Then he went to find the young woman from the subway, because she had reminded him of something his father had always known. That the most important things are the ones you never see coming. The small kindnesses. The moments when you make yourself smaller so someone else can have space. That was real chemistry. That was how you changed the world. William's head of operations, David Torres, called 3 days later. I found her. Sarah Mitchell, 20 years old, sophomore at Austin Community College. Pre-med track with a 4.0 GPA. Works at Jenny's Diner on 6th Street. William felt something loosen in his chest. Thank you, David. Do you want me to arrange a meeting? No. I'll handle it myself. William went back to riding the subway. Every morning the same line, the same time, watching for her. He felt slightly foolish, a 73-year-old billionaire stalking public transportation hoping to run into a college student. But he could not bring himself to simply show up at her workplace or her school. That felt too aggressive, too much like using his power to corner her. He wanted their next meeting to be natural. To happen the way the first one had, in the organic flow of ordinary life. On the fourth morning, he saw her. She was standing near the far end of the car, pressed against the doors with her backpack clutched to her chest. She looked even more exhausted than before. Dark circles under her eyes, her shoulders hunched with weariness. And there was a bandage on her right hand, wrapped around her palm and thumb. William worked his way through the crowd toward her. When he was close enough, he spoke quietly. Excuse me. She looked up, not recognizing him at first. Then her eyes widened slightly. Oh, hello. You're the gentleman from before. She smiled, though it did not quite reach her eyes. Did you make it to your meeting? I did. Thank you again for your kindness that day. William gestured to her bandaged hand. Are you all right? Sarah glanced down as if she had forgotten about the injury. Oh. This. Grabbed a hot pan handle at work. I'm fine. It was clearly not fine. The bandage was fresh but already showing signs of seepage. A burn bad enough to need that much gauze. That looks painful. William said, have you seen a doctor? Can't afford to. She said it matter-of-factly without self-pity. It'll heal on its own. William felt anger rise in his chest. Not at her, but at a system that made a pre-med student with a 4.0 GPA choose between medical care and making rent. The train swayed and more passengers pushed on at the next stop. Sarah was pressed further back against the doors. William instinctively moved to create a buffer, using his body to block the worst of the crush. Thank you, she said, surprised by the gesture. They rode in silence for 2 stops. William wanted to ask her 1,000 questions. About her studies, her life, what obstacles she faced every day. But he did not want to pry. Finally, he settled on something simple. I'm William, by the way. I don't think I properly introduced myself last time. Sarah. She offered her left hand since her right was bandaged. He shook it gently. Sarah Mitchell. It's nice to officially meet you, Sarah. That day, the kindness you showed me, it meant more than you might realize. Sarah looked at him curiously. It was just a seat, it was more than that. It reminded me of something I'd forgotten. What's that? That the small things we do for each other are often the most important things. The train reached the university station. Sarah adjusted her backpack, preparing to exit. "This is my stop," she said. "It was nice seeing you again, William." "Wait," William said, then immediately felt awkward. Sarah paused, looking at him with polite curiosity. "I wanted to thank you properly. Could I buy you coffee? Or breakfast? Whatever time works for you." Sarah studied him for a long moment. He could see her weighing the offer, trying to determine if this was safe, if this old man had ulterior motives she needed to worry about. "That's very kind," she said slowly. "But you really don't need to do that." "I know I don't need to. But I would like to if you're willing. I promise I'm harmless. Just an old man who appreciates kindness when he encounters it." The train doors chimed their warning. "There's a coffee shop on campus," Sarah said. "Benson Hall, first floor. I'm usually there studying around 2 between classes. I'll be there at 2. William said. Sarah nodded and stepped off the train. As the doors closed, William caught a glimpse of her walking toward the exit, favoring her right hand, her shoulders set with the determination of someone who had gotten used to pushing through pain. He spent the rest of the morning thinking about what he would say to her. How to have a conversation that was genuine without being intrusive. How to learn about her life without making her feel like she was being interrogated or pitied. At 1:45, William arrived at Benson Hall. He had not been on a college campus in decades. The building was old but well maintained, full of students moving between classes with the casual certainty of people who believed they had all the time in the world. He found the coffee shop on the first floor, a small operation with mismatched chairs and students hunched over laptops at every available surface. He ordered a black coffee and found a table near the window, away from the main traffic. Sarah arrived at 2:07, apologizing before she even sat down. "Sorry I'm late. Professor went over and I couldn't leave until she finished." "No apology necessary. What would you like?" "My treat." Sarah glanced at the menu board above the counter. William could see her eyes tracking the prices, calculating what she could accept without seeming ungrateful or looking desperate. "Just a regular coffee is fine," she said. "Black. Are you sure? They have sandwiches, pastries. When did you last eat?" "I had breakfast." The way she said it made William suspect breakfast had been something grabbed hastily between shifts, probably not enough to sustain someone through a full day of classes and work. William stood. "I'm going to get a couple sandwiches. I always order too much and end up wasting food. You'd be doing me a favor by helping me eat it." Before Sarah could protest, he walked to the counter and ordered 2 turkey sandwiches, a veggie wrap, a pastry, and 2 coffees. When he returned to the table, Sarah was looking at him with an expression somewhere between gratitude and suspicion. "You really didn't have to do all that," she said. "I know, but I wanted to." He set the food down. "Please, eat. I can see you're exhausted, and a coffee alone isn't going to help." Sarah hesitated, then picked up one of the sandwiches. She ate it with the careful control of someone trying not to look too hungry. But William saw the way her eyes closed briefly when she took the first bite, the way her shoulders relaxed slightly. When had she last had a real meal? They sat in silence for a few minutes while Sarah ate. Then William spoke. "You're studying chemistry, advanced organic, from what I could see of your textbook." Sarah swallowed her bite of sandwich. "You remember that? I pay attention to details. Are you planning to go into medicine?" "That's the plan. Pre-med track. Hoping to get into medical school, though I'm not sure how I'll afford it." She took a sip of her coffee. "What do you do if you don't mind me asking?" "I'm in real estate, commercial development mostly. Like selling properties. More like developing them, building them, managing them. I own the company." Sarah absorbed this information. "So you're successful then?" "I've done well, yes. But you take the subway?" "Not usually," William admitted. "That morning was unusual. My driver was sick, my backup service was delayed. But I've been taking it more since then. It's been educational." Sarah smiled slightly. "Educational. That's one way to put it." She took another bite of her sandwich.
Most people in your position would probably just hire another driver. Most people in my position have forgotten what it's like to be anywhere else. I'm trying to remember. The honesty seemed to surprise her. She studied his face more carefully, and William had the sense of being evaluated by someone with a sharp mind and sharper instincts. Why? She asked. Why are you trying to remember? Because I spent 50 years climbing away from where I started. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing the people who were still there. I stopped understanding what their lives were like. And giving you a seat on the train changed that. It reminded me of something my father used to do. He worked at a tire factory in West Texas for 42 years. Hated every minute of it, but he needed the job. And still every Sunday, he would mow our elderly neighbor's lawn because she couldn't afford to pay someone. William paused, surprised by how much he was sharing. But there was something about Sarah's directness that made him want to be honest. When I asked him why he did it, he said, "You help people because it's right, not because it pays." I believed that once. But somewhere along the way, I forgot. Sarah was quiet for a moment. What made you forget? Success, I suppose. Money. The belief that if I was wealthy, I must be doing everything right. That if people were struggling, they must be doing something wrong. He met her eyes, sitting on that subway, watching you stand in obvious pain because you'd given me your seat. I realized how backwards I'd had it. I wasn't in that much pain. Sarah said, but the lie was unconvincing. Yes, you were. You're in pain right now. I can see it in the way you're holding yourself. William gestured to her bandaged hand. You're working too much, studying too hard, probably not sleeping or eating enough. And still you saw an old man who looked tired, and you chose to help him. Sarah's eyes got bright with unexpected tears. She blinked them back quickly. My mom used to say that kindness is free, but it's worth more than money. She spent her whole life cleaning other people's houses, taking care of other people's families. And she never stopped helping people, even when she had nothing left to give. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. She died 2 years ago. Heart attack while she was working. Just collapsed on someone's kitchen floor and was gone. I'm so sorry. She was 51 years old. She spent 30 years cleaning houses, and it killed her. And I'm terrified I'm going to end up the same way, working myself to death trying to survive. The words came out in a rush, as if Sarah had been holding them in for too long and they finally burst through. She looked shocked at herself, at how much she had revealed to a stranger. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I don't know why I told you all that. Don't apologize. Sometimes it's easier to talk to strangers than to people who know us. William leaned forward slightly. Can I ask you something? Sure. What would you do if money weren't an issue? If you could focus entirely on your studies without having to work 30+ hours a week? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's a nice fantasy. But it's not reality, I know. But humor me. What would you do? Sarah thought about it. I'd study more, obviously. I'd volunteer at the free clinic on the east side, get more clinical experience. I'd take the MECAT prep course instead of trying to study for it on my own. She trailed off, shaking her head. It doesn't matter, none of that's possible. Why not? Because I can barely afford rent and food. Because I have a younger brother I'm helping support. Because life doesn't work that way for people like me. People like you. Poor people. First-generation college students from families that cleaned houses and worked at tire factories. She said it without bitterness, just stating a fact. The system isn't designed for us to succeed. It's designed to keep us in place. William felt the truth of that statement like a physical blow. Because she was right. The system he had benefited from, had helped perpetuate, was designed to favor people who already had advantages. People whose parents could pay their tuition. People who could afford to focus on studying instead of just surviving. People like him. Not people like Sarah. You're right, he said. And I'm sorry, you didn't create the system. No, but I've benefited from it. And I've done nothing to change it. He paused. Maybe it's time I started. Sarah looked at him skeptically. One person can't change the system. No, but one person can help another person. And that person can help someone else. And maybe over time, that adds up to something. That's very optimistic. Is it? You helped me on the subway. That small act of kindness changed how I see the world. Who knows what ripples that might create? Sarah smiled slightly, but it was sad. I don't think it works that way, but it's nice that you believe it does. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face tightened with stress. I have to go. My shift starts in 30 minutes and I need to change. She stood gathering her backpack. Thank you for the coffee, and the food. And for listening. Sarah, wait. William stood as well. Can I ask you one more thing? Sure. If someone wanted to help you, to make your path a little easier, how would they do it? What would actually be useful? Sarah studied him for a long moment. Are you asking hypothetically, or are you planning something? Hypothetically, I'm just trying to understand. Honestly, the most useful thing would be covering tuition and basic living expenses. That's what kills most students like me. We can handle the work, the studying, the pressure. It's the working 30 hours a week on top of everything else that breaks us. What if there was a scholarship program specifically for students in your situation? There are scholarship programs. I've applied to 16 of them. Got 2, which covered about half my tuition. She adjusted her backpack. Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do. The fact that you even care is more than most people in your position. But I've learned not to hope for rescue. Hope is expensive when you're poor.
She walked away before William could respond, disappearing into the crowd of students moving between classes. William sat back down and stared at his cold coffee. Hope is expensive when you're poor. The phrase echoed in his head. He pulled out his phone and called his attorney. Martin, I want to establish a new scholarship program, separate from my father's fund. This one will be specifically for pre-med students at Austin Community College who demonstrate financial need. That's very generous, William. What are you thinking in terms of scope? Full coverage, tuition, fees, books and a monthly living stipend. I want it to cover everything so students can actually focus on their education instead of just surviving. How many students per year? 10, in perpetuity. And Martin, I want this administered anonymously, no Harrison name on it, no press releases. I don't want recognition, I want it to be about the students. That's unusual, but we can structure it that way. What about selection criteria? Pre-med track, GPA above 3.5, demonstrated financial need with priority given to first-generation college students who are working to support themselves or their families. Got it. I'll start drafting the documents. This is going to require a significant endowment to sustain indefinitely, probably in the range of $2 to $3 million. Do it. And Martin, I want the first scholarships awarded within 30 days. Can we expedite the process? If you're willing to fund the first year directly while we establish the endowment, yes, do that. I want letters going out by the end of this month. William hung up and looked out the window at the students passing by. Somewhere out there Sarah Mitchell was changing into her work uniform, preparing to spend another night on her feet, serving people who would barely look at her. He could not save her specifically. She was too proud for that, and he respected it. But he could create opportunities. He could build a program that would help students like her, students who had the talent and the drive but not the resources. It would not fix the system. Sarah was right about that, but it was a start, and sometimes starting was enough. 3 weeks later Sarah Mitchell received a letter that would change her life. She almost did not open it. Official letters from the college were usually bad news. Tuition increases, policy changes, reminders about deadlines she was already painfully aware of. But something made her pause. The envelope was heavier than usual, the paper higher quality. She tore it open and read, Dear Miss Mitchell, congratulations, you have been selected as a recipient of the Harrison Pre-Medical Scholarship Program for the current academic year. This scholarship provides minus full coverage of tuition and fees, textbook allowance of $1,500 per semester, monthly living stipend of $1,000, renewable for up to 4 years, contingent on maintaining a GPA above 3.5. The Harrison Pre-Medical Scholarship was established to support students pursuing careers in medicine who demonstrate academic excellence and financial need. You were selected from a highly competitive pool of applicants based on your outstanding academic record and commitment to serving underserved communities. Please contact the financial aid office at your earliest convenience to complete the necessary paperwork. Sincerely, Austin Community Foundation Scholarship Committee. Sarah read the letter 3 times. Then she sat down on the stairs outside her apartment building and cried. Not quiet tears, great gulping sobs that shook her entire body. People walked past and stared, but she did not care. $1,000 per month, plus full tuition, plus books. She could quit the morning shifts at the diner. She could sleep more than 4 hours a night. She could send Marcus money without overdrawing her account. She could eat actual meals instead of stealing day-old bread from work. She could breathe. After 20 minutes, Sarah wiped her eyes and pulled out her phone. She searched for the Harrison Pre-Medical Scholarship. Nothing came up. No website, no news articles, no information beyond a brief mention on the Austin Community Foundation site listing it as a recently established fund by an anonymous donor. Anonymous. Sarah felt her euphoria cool slightly. She searched for Harrison and Austin and scholarship. The results were immediate. The Robert Harrison Memorial Scholarship, established in 1982. 1 student per year from Midland, Texas. 42 years of continuous funding. But nothing about a pre-medical program, nothing recent. Sarah searched for William Harrison and Austin, CEO of Harrison Development Corporation. Net worth estimated at over $3 billion. Major commercial developer throughout Texas. Known for. Sarah stopped reading. Her hands were shaking. William, the old man from the subway. The man she had given her seat to. The man she had met for coffee and told everything to about her mother and her struggles and her fears. William Harrison. He had done this. Sarah felt a complicated tangle of emotions crash over her. Gratitude, yes, but also humiliation. Anger. The searing shame of being pitied by someone who had no right to pity her. She had not asked for his help. She had not wanted to be anyone's charity project. But even as the anger rose, another emotion pushed against it. The memory of her bank account with $42. The memory of choosing between textbooks and food. The memory of burning her hand at work and not being able to afford proper medical care. Pride was expensive, hope was expensive, and she could not afford either one anymore. Sarah spent the rest of the day in a daze. She went to class but heard nothing. She tried to study but could not focus. The letter sat in her backpack like a physical weight, growing heavier with every hour. By evening she had made a decision. She waited at the metro station for 3 days. She knew William had started taking the subway regularly. She had seen him twice more since their coffee meeting. Always on the same line, always in the morning. On the 3rd morning she saw him bored. Sarah followed and positioned herself directly in front of where he sat. "We need to talk," she said. William looked up. Recognition flashed across his face, followed immediately by something else. Guilt, maybe, or fear of confrontation. "Hello, Sarah. Don't." Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "The scholarship, the Harrison Pre-Medical Scholarship, that's you, isn't it?" The train car was crowded but no one was paying attention. Just another mundane moment on a subway filled with strangers. William met her eyes. "Yes. Why?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "Because you needed help and I had the resources to provide it. I didn't ask for your help. I know." Sarah felt tears threaten but refused to let them fall. "I gave you my seat on the train. That's all I did. I gave you my seat because you looked tired, not because I wanted something from you, not because I expected anything. I know that too. Then why?" Her voice cracked despite her efforts to stay controlled. "Why did you investigate me? Why did you decide I was some project that needed fixing?" "I didn't investigate you." William paused. "That's not true. I did have someone find out your name and where you went to school. And you're right, I had no right to do that. But Sarah, I didn't create this scholarship because I pitied you. No." "Then why?" The train swayed and Sarah grabbed the overhead rail. Around them passengers read their phones, listened to music, existed in their own private worlds. William spoke quietly. "Because you reminded me of my father. He worked at a tire factory for 42 years doing work he hated because he had a family to support. When he died he left $5,000 in his will to establish a scholarship for 1 student. That was his entire life savings, and he used it to give someone else an opportunity he never had." Sarah absorbed this. "So this is about your father." "Partly. But it's also about you, and 9 other students who will receive this scholarship this year. Students who have the talent and the drive but not the resources. Students who are working themselves to exhaustion trying to survive while also trying to succeed. 9 other students. Yes, the program will support 10 students per year indefinitely. You're one of the first recipients, but you're not the only one. And the selection was done by the Community Foundations Committee. I didn't choose you specifically. I just created the opportunity. Sarah felt her anger wavering. You created a scholarship program. Because I gave you a seat on the subway. I created it because meeting you reminded me that I used to be one of those students. My father worked himself to death so I could go to college. And somewhere along the way, after I became successful, I forgot what that struggle felt like. I forgot that not everyone has the advantages I ended up with. The train slowed for the next stop. More passengers pressed toward the doors. I should refuse it, Sarah said quietly. I should tell them to give it to someone else. You could do that. But your pride won't pay your rent. It won't help your brother. It won't get you through medical school. William paused. And refusing it won't make the program disappear. It will just go to the next student in line. Sarah closed her eyes. She knew he was right. She also knew that accepting this would mean accepting that she had needed help, that her best efforts were not enough, that without intervention from someone with money and power, she would have been one of the countless talented students who never made it because the system was not designed for them to succeed. It was a bitter truth to swallow. If I accept this, she said finally, it's not because of you, it's because I earned it, because I've worked for it. You did earn it. Your GPA speaks for itself, and I'm paying it back. Every single cent. When I'm a doctor, I'm paying back the full amount. Sarah, that's non-negotiable. She opened her eyes and looked at him directly. I need to know this isn't charity. I need to know I earned it, and I'm going to give it back so someone else can use it. William studied her face. He saw the fierce pride there, the determination not to be reduced to someone's pet project. He recognized it because he had felt it himself once, decades ago, when he was a poor kid from West Texas trying to prove he belonged. All right, he said. When you're a doctor and you're ready, you can pay it back, or you can pay it forward to the next student who needs it. Your choice. But Sarah, I want you to understand something. This isn't charity. Charity is giving someone something they haven't earned. You earned this with your 4.0 GPA, while working 30 hours a week and supporting your brother. You earned it with every shift you worked while studying chemistry. You earned it by being exactly the kind of person who deserves support. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Not acceptance, not exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. Her stop was approaching. She adjusted her backpack, preparing to exit. Thank you, she said, not looking at him. Even though I'm still angry about you investigating me, even though I hate feeling like I needed saving, thank you. You didn't need saving. You were already saving yourself. This just makes it a little easier. Sarah stepped off the train. As the doors closed behind her, she stood on the platform for a long moment, watching the train disappear into the tunnel. Then she walked to campus, her mind spinning. $1,000 per month, full tuition, books. She could cut back her hours at the diner from 30 per week to 15, could actually sleep more than 4 hours a night. Could study without the constant pressure of calculating whether she could afford to eat or pay rent. She could help Marcus more. Could tell him to focus on basketball instead of worrying about being a burden. She could be the student she was capable of being instead of the exhausted person barely holding it together. In her ethics class later that morning, Professor Williams discussed moral dilemmas, whether accepting help diminished your achievements, whether owing someone created an obligation that compromised your autonomy. Sarah raised her hand for the first time all semester. Yes, Miss Mitchell. What if someone helps you without expecting anything in return? What if the help is genuinely offered with no strings attached? Professor Williams considered this. That's an interesting question. I suppose it depends on the motivation. Is the person helping because they genuinely want to support you, or because it makes them feel good about themselves? Does the motivation matter if the outcome is the same? If you receive help that changes your trajectory, does it matter why it was offered? Perhaps not to the outcome, but it might matter to how you feel about accepting it, to whether you feel grateful or indebted. Sarah thought about this. William had created the scholarship because she reminded him of his father, because he felt guilty about forgetting where he came from. Those were not pure motivations.
But did that make the scholarship less valuable? Did that make her acceptance of it any less earned? She went to the financial aid office after class and filled out the paperwork to accept the Harrison pre-medical scholarship. Her hand shook as she signed her name. This was it, the moment her life changed, not because of her own efforts alone, but because someone had seen her struggling and decided to help. And maybe she thought as she handed the completed forms to the administrator, maybe that was okay. Maybe accepting help did not diminish your achievements. Maybe needing support did not mean you were weak. Maybe survival required acknowledging that you could not do it all alone. Sarah walked out of the financial aid office and called Marcus. Hey sis, what's up? I got a scholarship, full ride plus living expenses. Marcus was silent for a moment. Then Sarah, that's amazing. Oh my God, that's incredible. I can send you more money now. You can quit that job at the community center. Focus on basketball. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. You're going to get a basketball scholarship to a good school, and I'm going to be there cheering you on. Marcus's voice got thick. Mom would be so proud of you. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She'd be proud of both of us. We're doing what she couldn't do. We're getting out. After they hung up, Sarah stood in the hallway outside the financial aid office and let herself feel it. Relief, overwhelming, crushing relief. She could breathe. Finally, after 2 years of drowning, she could breathe. That evening, Sarah went to the diner for her shift. She found Jenny in the kitchen. I need to talk to you about my schedule. Jenny looked up from the grill, concern crossing her face. Everything okay? Everything's great, actually. I got a scholarship. Full ride, I can cut back my hours. Jenny's face split into a huge smile. Sarah, that's wonderful. How many hours were you thinking? Maybe 15 per week instead of 30. I want to keep working here if that's okay. I like this place. I like you, but I need to focus more on school. Of course it's okay. You're one of my best workers. I'll take you however many hours you can give me. Jenny pulled Sarah into a hug. Your mama would be so proud, baby. So proud. Sarah hugged her back and let herself cry. For her mother who had worked herself to death cleaning other people's houses. For Marcus who was trying so hard to be strong. For herself and the weight she had been carrying that was finally getting lighter. And maybe just a little bit. For William Harrison, a billionaire who had remembered what it felt like to struggle, and had decided to do something about it. That night, Sarah slept for 8 hours straight. The first full night's sleep she had gotten in 2 years. She dreamed of her mother, but this time Linda Mitchell was smiling and saying, "You did good, baby. You did real good." 3 months passed. Sarah cut her hours at the diner to 15 per week, keeping only the weekend shifts. She slept more, ate better. Her grades already perfect, stayed perfect, but now she had time to actually absorb what she was learning instead of just memorizing for tests. She sent Marcus $500 every month. He quit his job at the community center and focused on basketball. His team made it to the regional semifinals. His grades improved. He started talking seriously about college, about scholarships, about futures that had seemed impossible just months before. Sarah also started volunteering 2 Saturdays per month at a free clinic in East Austin, shadowing doctors, learning what healthcare looked like for people who could not afford insurance. On her 3rd Saturday there, she saw William Harrison in the waiting room. He was not there as a patient. He was in a meeting with the clinic director, visible through the glass wall of the small office. They were looking at blueprints spread across the desk. Sarah felt her heart rate pick up. She had not seen him since the confrontation on the subway, had not known how to contact him, had not been sure she wanted to. The meeting ended, and William emerged from the office. His eyes found her immediately, as if he had known she was there. "Hello, Sarah, what are you doing here?" The question came out more accusatory than she intended. "Meeting with Dr. Ramirez about the expansion. We're adding 2 more exam rooms and a pharmacy." Sarah absorbed this. "You're funding the expansion. The Harrison Foundation is funding it." "Yes, we have been for about 6 months now. You never mentioned that when we had coffee. You didn't ask, and it's not the kind of thing I typically announce." A nurse called Sarah's name, asking for help with a patient. Sarah held up a finger, asking for a minute. "Can we talk?" she asked William. "After my shift ends, I get off at 3. I'll be here." Sarah spent the rest of her shift distracted, wondering what she was going to say to him. 3 hours later, she found William still there, sitting in the waiting room reading a medical journal. "There's a decent coffee place 2 blocks from here," Sarah said. "If you're interested." They walked in silence. The coffee shop was small and local, nothing like the chain on campus. They ordered and found a table in the corner. "I've been thinking about what you said on the subway," Sarah began. "About the scholarship not being charity, about me earning it. And I'm starting to believe you were right, not because I want to believe it, but because the alternative is giving up. And I've worked too hard to give up now." "That's good, I'm glad, but I want you to understand something. This scholarship changed my life. I can sleep now, I can eat, I can actually be the student I'm capable of being, and I'm grateful for that." She paused, "But it also made me angry." "Why?" "Because I shouldn't have needed it. The system should not be designed so that talented students have to work 30 hours a week just to survive. The system should not favor people who were born with advantages." "You're absolutely right. I know I am. And here's what I've decided. When I'm a doctor, I'm not just paying back the scholarship money. I'm going to fight to change the system. I'm going to work at clinics like this one, providing care for people who can't afford it. I'm going to advocate for policies that make education accessible. I'm going to use what you gave me to create opportunities for others." William smiled, and it was genuine. "That's exactly what my father hoped would happen, not just with his scholarship but with everything he did. He believed that helping one person could create ripples that spread far beyond what anyone could see." "Tell me about him," Sarah said. "About your father," William told her. "About Robert Harrison working at the tire factory for 42 years, about his love of chemistry and his dream of teaching, about the $5,000 scholarship he had established with his entire life savings. After he died, I took over the scholarship and expanded it," William said. "For 42 years it's been sending 1 student per year from my hometown to college. I never met any of them, just signed the checks, and let my accountants handle it. But that changed. Meeting you changed it. You reminded me that my father's scholarship was not just about the money. It was about seeing people who needed help and choosing to give it. About creating opportunities for people to become what they're meant to be. So you created the pre-med scholarship." "Yes, and I started getting more involved with my father's original fund. I've been reaching out to past recipients, learning about their lives, understanding what the opportunity meant to them." "That must have been humbling." It was. 42 people who became teachers and nurses and social workers. People who took the chance my father created and used it to help others. My father died with $5,000 in savings, but his legacy has touched hundreds of lives through what those 42 people have done. Sarah thought about this. "And what's your legacy going to be?" "I don't know yet, but I'm trying to figure it out. Trying to use whatever time I have left to create something that matters more than the buildings I've built." They talked for over an hour, about medicine and real estate and the ways the city was changing, about healthcare policy and affordable housing and what responsibility wealthy people had to society. "I got a letter from my daughter last week," William said. "Elizabeth, she's the one who wanted to be a teacher, the one you haven't spoken to in 11 years. Yes, she responded to a letter I wrote her. She's willing to meet. She wants me to meet her husband and my grandchildren." Sarah felt genuinely happy for him. "William, that's wonderful. I'm terrified," he admitted. "I don't know how to be a grandfather. I barely manage to be a father, and I've missed so much of their lives. But you're trying now, that matters."
Does it? Can you really make up for 11 years of stubbornness and pride? I don't know, but not trying guarantees you can't. Trying at least gives you a chance. William smiled. "When did you become so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just a 20-year-old college student trying to figure out how to survive and maybe if I'm lucky how to do some good along the way." "That's wisdom, Sarah. Real wisdom." They parted ways as the sun was setting, painting the Austin sky in shades of orange and pink. Sarah felt lighter than she had in months. Not just because of the scholarship, but because she was beginning to understand something. Accepting help did not diminish your achievements. Acknowledging need did not make you weak. And sometimes the most important thing you could do was let someone help you so that someday you could help someone else. The ripples spread outward from choices you could not always see coming. Sarah went home and called Marcus. "How was your game today?" "We won. Coach says scouts from Texas State were there watching. That's amazing, Marcus. I'm so proud of you. None of this would be possible without you, sis. Without the money you send, without you believing in me. We're doing this together. That's what family does. After they hung up, Sarah sat on her mattress on the living room floor and thought about the chain of events that had led here. Her mother working herself to death but teaching Sarah about kindness. Sarah giving up her seat to a stranger on the subway. That stranger creating a scholarship that changed her life. Sarah now helping Marcus, who would help others someday. The ripples spread outward, touching lives in ways you could never fully map or measure. That night Sarah dreamed of her mother again. Linda Mitchell was young in the dream before years of hard work had worn her down. She was smiling and saying, "This is how it's supposed to work, baby. We lift each other up, that's how we all rise." Sarah woke with tears on her face and hope in her heart. The gathering room at the Austin Community Foundation hummed with quiet conversations. Sarah paused in the doorway, overwhelmed by what she saw. Over 50 people spanning generations, all connected by a single thread of generosity that had been spinning for over 4 decades. The youngest scholarship recipients clustered near the refreshment table, their nervous energy familiar to Sarah. The oldest, a woman who must have been in her 60s, stood with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked this path long ago and found her way. William Harrison stood at the front of the room. 2 years had passed since their first meeting, and he looked different now, older in body but somehow lighter in spirit, as if he'd set down a burden he'd carried for too long. Beside him stood a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and an unmistakable resemblance to the photographs Sarah had seen of Robert Harrison. 2 children hovered near her, wide-eyed at the crowd. "I'd like you to meet my daughter Elizabeth," William said. "She's a chemistry teacher in El Paso. She reminds me every day what my father was trying to build." Sarah watched the exchange with a tightness in her chest. William had mentioned his estranged daughter once months ago in passing. The pain in his voice had been evident even through the careful neutrality of his words. "For 42 years my father's scholarship has been supporting students," William continued. "I've spent most of my life building things. Buildings, companies, wealth. But standing here, looking at all of you, I realize that the only things I've built that actually matter are the opportunities represented in this room." His voice thickened with emotion. "My father died at 64, working a job he hated so his family could survive. He left $5,000 for a scholarship because he believed education could change lives." Looking around this room at all the teachers and nurses and doctors and social workers you've become, I see his legacy multiplied beyond anything he could have imagined. A young woman raised her hand. "What made you decide to expand the program after all these years?" William's eyes found Sarah in the crowd. "I met someone who reminded me what my father was trying to teach me. She showed me that kindness has ripples we can't always see, and she made me want to be better than I had been." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks as several people turned to look at her. After the formal program, Sarah found herself in conversation with an elegant woman who introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Morrison, Dean of Students at UT Medical School. "You're Sarah Mitchell, one of this year's Harrison Scholars entering medical school." "Yes, ma'am, I wanted to introduce myself properly. I'm a Harrison Scholar too, from the original program. Class of 1984, the 3rd student to receive the scholarship." Sarah's eyes widened. 41 years ago, I've spent my career trying to pay it forward. Mr. Harrison's father gave me a chance when no one else would. I was a first-generation college student from Midland. My father worked at the tire factory with Robert Harrison. Dr. Morrison's smile held decades of memory. "Without that scholarship, I would never have become a doctor. And I've spent my career helping other students who remind me of who I was." "Is that why you're on the admissions committee?" "Yes, and why I advocated for your acceptance. Your application was outstanding, but I also saw something of myself in your story." She paused. "Don't thank me, just do what I did. Become the kind of doctor who remembers where you came from, who helps the next generation of students who need it." Later, Sarah found William standing alone near the window, watching the sunset paint the Austin skyline in shades of amber and rose. "That was really something," she said quietly. "Seeing everyone your father's scholarship has helped. 42 years of students I never met, never knew, never understood the impact on until recently." He turned to her. "Dr. Morrison told you about advocating for your admission." She did. "See, Ripples. My father helped Dr. Morrison in 1984. She became Dean of Students. Now she's helping you. Who will you help? Everyone I can. Sarah took a breath. William, I want to be on the board. The Harrison Foundation board. When I'm done with medical school, when I'm established as a doctor, I want to help decide who gets scholarships. I want to be part of continuing what your father started. William's expression shifted to something Sarah couldn't quite name. Relief perhaps, or hope. I was hoping you'd say that, because I've been restructuring the foundation. Instead of my family controlling everything, I'm transitioning it to a board made up entirely of former scholarship recipients. People who understand what it means to struggle. People who know what help actually looks like. Sarah felt something expand in her chest. You're giving control to us. You're the ones who know what matters. I'm just the person who happens to have the money, the wisdom, the understanding, the vision for what the foundation should be. That's going to come from people like you. Elizabeth joined them, her children trailing behind. After brief introductions, the kids tugged at her sleeve. Grandpa, can you come visit us soon? The girl Emma asked. You promised you'd come see my science project. I'll be there next weekend, William promised. I want to hear all about your chemistry experiment. After they left, William and Sarah stood together in the emptying room. You have a beautiful family, Sarah said. I almost lost them. 11 years of stubbornness and pride almost cost me the only thing that actually matters. He paused. Thank you, Sarah, for giving up your seat that day, for reminding me what I'd forgotten. You created something incredible. 10 students a year getting full support, now 20. That's going to change lives. 20 is just the beginning. Next year we're adding scholarships for children of service workers, janitors, housekeepers, cafeteria workers. People like your mother who keep the world running while being completely invisible. Sarah's breath caught. You're serious? Completely. Your mother spent 30 years cleaning houses. Their children deserve opportunities. And I want you to help design the program. What criteria matter? What support do students really need? Sarah nodded, unable to speak around the tightness in her throat. They stood together as the sun set over Austin, watching the city transform from day to night. I'm starting medical school in August, Sarah said. 4 years of studying, then residency. It's going to be hard. You've handled harder. Have I though? The past 2 years have been the easiest of my life, thanks to the scholarship. I've had time to actually learn instead of just survive. What if I can't handle it when things get difficult again? You'll handle it the same way you handled everything before, by working hard and refusing to give up. And this time you'll have support. Sarah thought about her mother, about the years of struggle that had ended on a stranger's kitchen floor, about the weight Linda Mitchell had carried alone. My mom used to say she had to be strong for me and Marcus, that she couldn't show weakness because then we'd know how bad things really were. That must have been lonely. It was. She died alone, William. Collapsed and died alone because she was too proud or too scared to ask for help. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to ask for help when I need it. And someday, when I'm a doctor, I'm going to make sure other people know they don't have to carry everything alone either. William put a hand on her shoulder. That's the real legacy, not the buildings or the money, but the understanding that we're all connected, that helping each other is not weakness but wisdom. They walked out into the warm Austin evening together. Tomorrow Sarah would go back to preparing for medical school. But tonight she felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Not just hope, but certainty. Certainty that she was going to make it. Certainty that her mother's sacrifice had not been in vain. Certainty that the ripples from one small act of kindness had spread farther than anyone could have imagined. The East Austin Free Clinic had transformed. 7 years had reshaped not just the building, now 2 floors, 18 exam rooms, a full pharmacy, dental office and mental health services, but also the woman who walked its halls. Dr. Sarah Mitchell at 29, carried herself differently than the exhausted college student who had once given up her subway seat. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived their fears and found purpose on the other side. The clinic had been renamed the Robert and Linda Harrison Memorial Clinic, honoring both the man who had started everything with $5,000 and the woman who had died too young on someone's kitchen floor. Sarah stood in her office reviewing the morning's patient schedule when the receptionist appeared in her doorway. Dr.
Mitchell, there's someone asking for you specifically in the waiting room. The young woman looked exactly like Sarah had looked 9 years earlier. Dark skin, exhausted eyes, a worn coat, a backpack with patches sewn over tears. The visible markers of someone fighting to survive while trying to succeed. Dr. Mitchell, I'm Alicia Rodriguez, one of the Harrison scholars, pre-med at ACC. Sarah felt time collapse on itself. It's nice to meet you, Alicia. What can I do for you? I wanted to say thank you, in person. The scholarship is changing my life. I can actually breathe now, you know. I cut back my hours at work. I can sleep. I can study without constantly worrying about rent. Sarah remembered that feeling. The overwhelming relief. The sense of finally being able to breathe. I was in your position 9 years ago. First recipient of the pre-med program. Alicia's eyes widened. You were a Harrison scholar. I was. And I want you to know something. You're going to make it. I know it feels overwhelming. I know you're probably still stressed and tired, and wondering if you can really do this, but you can, and you will. How do you know? Because you're smart enough to get into the program. Because you're determined enough to work while taking chemistry. Because you cared enough to come here and say thank you in person. Those things tell me you have what it takes. Alicia's eyes filled with tears. Does it ever stop feeling like you're one mistake away from losing everything? Sarah thought carefully. It takes time. The fear doesn't go away immediately, but it gets better. You learn to trust that you have support. You learn that asking for help isn't weakness, and eventually you realize you've built something solid that can't be taken away from you. They talked for 20 minutes. Sarah shared what she'd learned about medical school, about balancing studying with self-care, about surviving the MCAT. She gave Alicia her phone number and told her to reach out any time. After Alicia left, Sarah sat in her office, phone in hand. She called William. I just met one of the new Harrison scholars, Alicia Rodriguez. She came to the clinic to say thank you. How is she doing? She reminds me of myself 9 years ago. Exhausted but determined. Scared but hopeful. Carrying weight she shouldn't have to carry but doing it anyway. And you'll help her the way I tried to help you. I will. Because you showed me that's how it works. We lift each other up. We pass forward the help we received. Sarah paused. Dr. Morrison called yesterday. She's stepping down as chair of the foundation board next year. She wants me to take over. I know. She asked me what I thought. I told her you were ready. I'm only 29. I was 31 when I took over my father's scholarship. Age doesn't matter, Sarah. Vision matters. Understanding matters. And you have both. Sarah thought about her mother. About Linda Mitchell, who had died at 51, never seeing what her sacrifice would create. About the hundreds of students whose lives would be shaped by decisions Sarah would help make. I'll do it, she said. I'll chair the board, for my mother, for your father, for every student who comes after us. They would both be proud of you. I know I am. The call from Elizabeth Harrison came 2 weeks later, unexpected and strangely nervous. Sarah, I hope you don't mind that I got your number from Dad. Of course not. Is everything okay? Yes, but I wanted to talk to you about something. Emma, my daughter, she's applying for the Harrison pre-medical scholarship next year. She's at ACC now, pre-med track, and even though we can afford her tuition, she wants to earn it herself. She wants to be part of this legacy. Sarah felt emotion rise in her throat. That's incredible. I told her she might not get it, that the selection is competitive and they don't give preference to family. But she said she didn't want preference. She said if she's going to be a doctor, she wants to do it the way great-grandpa Robert would have done it, by earning it. She sounds remarkable. She is. And I wanted to thank you, Sarah, for reminding my father what mattered, for helping him find his way back to us. I got 11 years with my dad that I never thought I'd have. Emma and James have a grandfather who shows up to their science fairs and soccer games. That's because of you. It's because your father chose to change. He chose to change because you showed him it was possible. After they hung up, Sarah sat with those words. She thought about chains of connection, her mother's sacrifice, Sarah's choice to give up her seat, William's decision to create opportunities, Elizabeth's willingness to forgive, Emma's determination to honor her great-grandfather's legacy. All of it connected, all of it rippling outward in ways no one could have predicted. That evening, over dinner with Marcus, now a physical education teacher in Houston working with at-risk youth, Sarah felt the weight of what they were building. "I've been thinking about starting a program at my school," Marcus said. "After-school mentoring for kids from low-income families, help them with homework, teach them life skills, show them that college is possible." "The Harrison Foundation," Sarah said immediately. "We could create a program specifically for that. You could help design it." Marcus stared at her. "Are you serious? You know what these kids need because you were one of them. The foundation should be learning from people like you." They talked late into the night, planning. It was exactly what their mother would have wanted. Her children using their education and resources to help other people's children have better chances. The call came on a cold December morning. "Sarah, it's Elizabeth. It's Dad. He had another stroke. The doctors say it's serious this time." Sarah found William in a private hospital room, looking small and fragile in the bed. Elizabeth sat beside him, holding his hand. Emma and James were there too, red-eyed from crying. "Sarah," William said when he saw her. His voice was weak, words slightly slurred. "You came." "Of course I came." Sarah pulled up a chair. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. Very tired." He smiled slightly, but grateful. "I've had a good run. Better than I deserved." "Don't say that. It's true. I wasted 50 years chasing the wrong things. But I got the last 9 years right, thanks to you." Sarah felt tears stream down her face. "You've been supporting students for 43 years. You reconnected with your family. You changed hundreds of lives. Because you reminded me what mattered." His grip on her hand was weak. "Promise me something. Anything. Keep the foundation true to what my father started. Don't let it become just another check-writing operation. Keep it personal. Keep it real. Make sure every student knows that someone believes in them. I promise." "And Sarah, take care of yourself. Don't work yourself to death the way your mother did. Don't wait until you're 80 to figure out that relationships matter more than achievements." "I won't. I promise." William closed his eyes. "I'm so proud of you. Of the doctor you've become. Of the person you've always been." Sarah stayed for hours. Elizabeth and the children stayed too. They told stories about Robert Harrison, about Linda Mitchell, about the legacy that connected them all. William died 3 days later peacefully, surrounded by family. His funeral drew hundreds CEOs and politicians, but also nurses, teachers and social workers. People from every level of society, all connected by the quiet transformation of his life. Sarah stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. She saw young Harrison scholars standing together near the back. She saw her brother in the front row. She saw former scholarship recipients, spanning decades. "William Harrison spent the first 73 years of his life building an empire," she began. "And he spent the last 9 years building something better, a legacy that will outlive him." Her voice tightened. 9 years ago, I gave William my seat on a subway train. I was exhausted. I needed that seat. But I saw someone who looked more tired than I felt, and I chose kindness over convenience. That small choice changed both our lives. It reminded William of what his father had taught him, that helping people isn't about recognition or return on investment. It's about seeing someone who needs support and choosing to give it. She spoke of his father, who had worked at a tire factory for 42 years and saved $5,000 for one scholarship, one chance. That single act grew into a foundation supporting over 120 students every year. Thousands of lives touched. That, Sarah said softly, is legacy. Not buildings or bank accounts, but the lives we touch, the opportunities we create, the chain of kindness that continues long after we're gone. After the funeral, the foundation board met. Sarah was elected chair. Her first decision was to establish the William Harrison Legacy Scholarship, supporting students pursuing careers in education and healthcare, especially those who had faced hardship. Among the first recipients was his granddaughter, who earned it on merit alone. 2 years later, Sarah sat in her office at the Robert and Linda Harrison Memorial Clinic, reviewing scholarship applications, still her favorite part of the job. One application stopped her cold. Michael Torres, 20 years old, sophomore at a community college, pre-med, working 35 hours a week as a custodian, first-generation student. His father had worked at a tire factory. His mother cleaned houses. Her hands shook as she read his essay. He wrote about parents whose labor was invisible but essential. A father whose lungs were damaged from chemicals but still helped with chemistry homework. A mother whose hands cracked from cleaning, yet found time to help others. He wrote that success wasn't measured by money, but by how many people you helped. Sarah called her colleague immediately. "I found him," she said. "The next one." That afternoon, she called Michael. He answered cautiously, bracing for bad news. Instead, she told him he had been selected for the Harrison Pre-Medical Scholarship, full tuition, books and living support for 4 years. There was silence. Then a quiet, broken sound. "I was the first recipient," Sarah told him. "I know what you're carrying, and I promise you're going to make it." After the call, Sarah cried alone in her office, for Michael, for his parents, for her own mother, and for the chain that connected them all. That evening, she took the subway home. She could afford to drive now, but she preferred the train. It reminded her where she had been. At one stop, an elderly woman boarded slowly, wearing a cleaning uniform, under a worn coat. Her hands were raw from chemicals. She struggled to stand as the train moved. Sarah looked at her seat. She was tired. She had been on her feet all day. She stood up. "Please," she said. "Sit down." The woman thanked her and sat. Across the car, a teenage boy watched. Moments later, when a pregnant woman boarded, he stood and offered his seat. Sarah felt tears rise. The ripples spreading, still spreading. She got off at her stop and walked home. Tomorrow she would see patients, review applications, build new programs. But that night, she sat by the window, watching the city lights. "I made it matter, Mom," she whispered. And in the quiet, she knew the ripples would keep moving, far beyond anything she could ever see.